then?
We have a quorum.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order for the Budget and Finance Committee for the City of Sunset Valley for Thursday, April 30th. It's 6 o'clock. And do we have all members present?
Members present are Alfonso Carmona, Charles Goyette, Charles Young, John Belanca, Mark Bruner, Michael Francis, Robert Browning, Rudy Rosengarten, Terry Cowan, and Wanda Reeds. And I know Rudy is a council alternate. And Councilmember Gonzalez just joined as well. And Regine is on the line. So.
Oh boy, and the mayor is here. It's a full
mayor's on the line as well, yes.
It's a full crew. All right.
We also have Susanna Flegel, our new accountant, who just joined us.
Good evening, Susan. Glad to have you with us.
Hello.
All right, we will then jump into, since we've called the meeting to order, do we have any citizen comments?
I have one, Michael.
Charles?
Just looking at the agenda over the last couple of days, and I thought I would make the suggestion, and maybe it becomes an actual agenda item in the future. But I think it would be helpful if the sponsors and co-sponsors of the various agenda items on the agenda would be acknowledged. That would be useful to me anyway. That's all I have to say tonight.
Well, I can tell you how this is done. Regine and I have a call usually on Tuesday, a week or so before the meeting. And we go through whatever issues were left from the previous meeting. We look ahead at the agenda for the calendar for the year. And then we talk about items that need to go on based on that calendar that we approved at the last meeting, and then any items that come forth from council that they want us to work on. And so that's how that gets created. And of course, Sylvia's input, and if anything else needs to be done. So that's how that comes to life.
So if a member of the committee wanted to sponsor an item, how would that work?
Yeah, sure. Just holler at me and we'll get it on there. You'll need to prepare some backup, or we'll help you with putting the backup together for the committee. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have something, Michael.
Excuse me?
I have a comment.
Mr. Cowan.
Just to catch you guys, just to catch you guys up. I've got a couple of projects. I've been looking into the future of the business district. And so I just want to make you aware of two projects. One is a volunteer project to provide some support to the employees of the small businesses who have been laid off as a result of the coronavirus. And it's based on something that's being done in Austin in the Red River Cultural District. That's the music venue district, downtown Austin. And it's not governmentally controlled, and it's citizen driven. And I'll inform. I've been working with some people who are in our neighborhoods, and I'll keep you guys abreast as that develops. It's a volunteer effort. Cool. Secondly, looking at, I'm also talking with people about branding and marketing and the business district, and this whole idea of it being a cultural district has come into play. And so I will update the committee as work proceeds on that. And I'll probably contact some of you about it. All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Terry. Anyone else? All right, clipping right along, we're on to our third item, which is approval of the meeting minutes from April 2nd. I just had one item to add on line item 64. That was due to time constraints, was my suggestion on that. I didn't just decide to arbitrarily kill those items. But our conversation was lengthy, and we didn't finish till 9 o'clock anyway, so picking up a discussion of the reserve policy and the long-range financial plan at 9 o'clock at night didn't seem to be a prudent use of our time. So that's why that got kicked down the road a little bit. So
I can
with that,
add that.
thank you. Anyone else?
Are we
Move that
using
we
the,
approve.
are we using the hands up deal, or we just jump in?
Just jump in.
Okay, so yeah, I had a couple of items. With regard to the April 2nd minutes, the number 2 item, citizen public comments. Mark Wells supposedly spoke that night, but I was listening to the audio and there were no citizen comments that evening. So I don't know how that squeaked in, but that's not correct. And I had another item over, just a general item. I'm looking at this set of minutes and also the minutes for April 16th. And there's commentary that comes kind of into the equation or into the minutes. Like, for example, number 5, discuss the effects on the city revenue loss due to COVID-19, etc. And the second bullet item, the Budget and Finance Committee discussed this item in detail, some highlight included. And, there's sort of some opinion in there that that I don't necessarily feel represents the group at large. And, it's followed up by a motion to approve. And, it sort of leads one to believe that that was part of the approval process. And, I don't think that's the case at all. Like, for example, the first bullet item under the second item in number 5, the Budget and Finance Committee discussed this item in detail. 80% estimated reduction in revenue as a conservative amount. Maybe. I don't know if that was the consensus of opinion. Wait and see what is really happening. Home Depot is very busy. Explore options for Uplands properties. Don't sell, lease. I mean, these represent opinions. I don't know that they really belong in the minutes, honestly. I mean, as far as the city council is concerned, they try to keep their minutes very cut and dry, right? Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. So I just wanted to recommend that maybe minutes are a little bit more laborious than they need to be, and they inject some opinion that may not be the opinion of some. I can cite other examples, but I don't want to belabor the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Anyone else?
That's an interesting concept, and I think I don't object to talking about it, thinking about it. I don't know that we need to do that today. Maybe put it as an agenda item sometime down the road. Sometimes it's helpful to hear the entire discussion, right? If you're a citizen, you may want to know what Fred had to say, or George, right? Who you may hold in high esteem, or and so reading the minutes may be beneficial if you could get that kind of comment. Either that, or you go the way of city council and say, we talked about it, end of the story. Oh, okay. I don't know. We could talk about it later.
This is Councilmember Rosengarten speaking. The bullet items are basically a reflection of individuals within the committee. There was no motion made on that. They are just simply notes. The motion that was made was for council to basically figure out and declare what is essential services. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear what
guess
you're saying.
I'm sorry.
My experience with minutes have been they're either one way or the other, trying to find that middle ground, right? So you can either just keep it. Some groups are very motion, discussion, second, and that's it. And sometimes they kind of just begin to drift where it does say there was just a discussion, and there was just a general discussion on some of those things. There was also a lot more. So I think Charles's point is well taken. they're kind of picked through. I don't know. It demonstrates that there was some breadth to our conversation, right? We covered a gamut of things. I can go either way. It's kind of what it's developed. My personal preference is that it's just motions and seconds and who voted for what, and leave it at that. But maybe John's right. We can put it on one of the agendas for conversation if the council prefers or has some preference. We can customize them around that. If it's just the facts, ma'am, then we can do that.
I would like that discussion.
If I may interject something.
Of course.
So the ordinance for council says that that no comments are necessary. It's just the motions and topics like that, and that is, I believe, kind of the way I normally do them. This was a little different with the COVID-19, so I put what, in my opinion, were the highlights. I'm sure that they weren't highlights for everybody, or there could have been different highlights. I have no issue with just doing the motions and the seconds and who that is a proper way to do minutes, because the minutes are actually supposed to just detail what happened, not what people said, not what people did, just what happens in the meeting. So we can bring it up in his agenda, or I can just do that without without any emotion or anything, because you have the recording that we could go back to and listen to if you really want a transcript of the meeting. But I will say that the number 5 item, that was I don't want to say my opinion, but it was things that I just wrote down that I thought were highlights. So, that's just my input.
I can go either way. What's the committee's brothers? Anybody adverse to maybe dropping that whole component out of there?
I think as long as you have the recording, it's fine to have just the minimal amount for minutes, right? Because
Sure.
if you have the recording, you have something people can go back to and find out what the discussion actually was.
Yeah.
Can I make a motion that we continue to follow the format as specified by the ordinance that we've been doing?
Is that on the agenda?
No.
No.
However,
Yep.
if we don't want to approve the minutes, and then Regine could rework those and we can bring them to the next meeting if you want.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
So there is an error in those minutes in the April 2nd in terms of a citizen comment recorded, which didn't actually happen. So, I mean, it's not a big deal, but it didn't really happen. It doesn't reflect reality.
Dr. Browning, would you be amenable to an amendment to your motion to strike Mark Wells line item 24 from the minutes?
Yes.
Seconder?
And also line 61, there needs to be a correction for April 2nd, needs to be April 9th.
Hold on, Rudy. Charles, are you okay with that change to line item 24?
Yes, of course.
Okay. And Rudy, what was yours, 61?
61.
Yeah, I had to change the date on that one.
Okay. With the date change at 61?
Mm-hmm.
And then don't forget, Michael, you wanted an explanation under 64 due to time constraints.
Right.
Yes. So is the motioner okay with the changes as presented?
Yes.
Seconder?
Yes.
Any objection by the committee? All right, all in favor say aye.
All right.
I need to call roll for the record, Michael.
Hold on a second, is there any nays? There you go, Sylvia. Does that work?
Yeah, do we have any, okay. Do we have
No,
any
no.
members not here?
Hey,
No, I think everybody's here.
this is Rudy. Can I make one more mention on the minutes?
Well, they were just passed.
I know. April 16th, line 33. Let's get Mark's name right. Mark Bruton.
Mark
We're gonna
Brunner.
nickname,
Got,
we're
got
gonna
it.
nickname him Marge from now on.
Okay. All right, we're on to the item 4, which is the discussion on the reserve policy for the city of Sunset Valley. Couple of thoughts here before we launch into this. Regine and I had some conversation today. As you can imagine, this is, and as we all know, this is not as simple as it might seem, but I'll let Regine explain one of her thoughts, which I thought was a good starting point, along with some other issues. Regine?
So I just my thought was that we could start out with something as begin to like say something like when revenue decreases by 60%, 80%, 10%, whatever, that the reserve fund could be used, and that number would be probably a pretty high number. But that would be just a starting point to when can we use it? When should we use it? So there's no question as to like, okay, if our like in the COVID-19, if our policy said would revenues decrease to only 20% of what was projected, we can use the reserve, and then bill from that, and then Michael and I were talking about other things like if the bridge on ERW got washed out, we'd have to find some money and use the reserve for that. So that would be some kind of catastrophe. Maybe have a percentage of what that if a project that's 25% of cost or something like that, you'd have to put something in there about that too. But that was just a couple of starting points. I believe Sylvia also sent us an email about like when something like this does happen, what percentage would you cut expenses? What would it be 25%, 10%, 15%? That should probably be in the policy also. So that was a starting point. I kind of would like to see a plan, what are the questions we really want, or when should we start using them? How much should we use? How many months should we use? And that's where I'm leaving off.
It's complicated. It's a lot of if this then that, right?
Correct.
So it seems, just kind of summing up what we just talked about, that there's like 3 categories there. There would be a percentage of reduction in revenue. The term disaster and of some economic proportion might be a trip for that. Again, I'm just thinking through this out loud with you that, a bridge washes out or there's some flood and it's pretty minor. It could be handled out of the general fund. Maybe it doesn't trip reserves, but if it's something rises to a certain level that it becomes eligible for reserve funds. Of course, this is all at the council has full discretion over all that anyway, but it provides some guidance to councils in the future. If there was some sort of unforeseen infrastructure issue, right? Major water line, I don't know, or some sort of serious internal expense we hadn't anticipated. Now, trying to define those. Thoughts?
Does it help to think of thinking about this in terms of essential and non-essential services? Where, for example, if you define the set of essential services, and I realize we haven't done that yet, but you can say, for example, and I'm just throwing this out for discussion, reserves will not be used until non-essential services or some proportion of non-essential services has been cut. And I hesitate a little bit on that because I think that it's impossible to plan for every possible scenario that could arise.
Yeah.
So I think this is something you have to be careful about.
I think that's an excellent point, Charles. I mean, if we were doing this a year ago, who would have written in, well, let's put something in for a pandemic? I mean, we may have vaguely talked about it, but it wouldn't be because we had no So it's hard to really define what's coming down the pipe, as we've seen. But it does provide some guidance to, I think, the citizenry, that there's been some thought, some logical thought to that. Not that some council would come on and just say, let's put in a water park and look at the reserves. It doesn't rise to the level of qualifying for using reserves, as opposed to what we have now, which is essentially nothing.
I think you need to have a requisite discussion on, first you need to cut expenses before reserves. And I mean, I guess that goes to the points of essential and non-essential, but I think one of my very first meetings with you guys, I said we needed to have an elasticity policy. When revenues come down a certain percent, you should have the same requisite expense decrease. And you can start off in whatever category you'd like, maybe projects and those kinds of things, programs, and then get cut, whatever order that needs to be. Once you get to a level that you can't cut anymore, then you have to consider a discussion of reserves. And that discussion, that use of reserves, obviously wouldn't be 100% of that month's reserve, because not knowing in an epidemic like this one how long it's going to last, that reserve policy also needs to have elasticity built in it.
This is a tough one.
Well, one possible way to think about it, and this kind of also speaks to budgeting for the rest of the year and maybe even next year, is to categorize things like, here's what we would cut at 80% of revenues. Here's what we would cut if we went down to 60%, 40%, 20%. That may be something more complicated than what we want to do, but it's one way to think about it.
It's that phrase, the low-hanging fruit, right? So the first cut goes through, I mean, if you broke it into 3 tiers, fire and water, wastewater is the core of what would go, which couldn't go, right? You can't drop that last component. But in the middle of that might be non-essential services that we do, having City Hall open, those kind of things. And then the subsidies would be in that top group that might come off the top. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
I think Sylvia had a great idea, and that is the first thing we need to have the starting point, and the starting point to even start thinking about taking from the reserves would be after you've begun to have difficulty sustaining and meeting needed services and maybe desired services. And then the next ability to pay your bills, and all that has to be predicated on the fact that you've taken a look at what your what expenses could be cut, and you cut those. And then you start thinking about the definitions of how you would approach getting into the reserves. I think that's a logical approach to it. I think she hit it on the head.
Yeah, there's some correlation between the two.
Yeah.
Right, as we see one, the other one corresponds to some level. So that fits nicely into, I think, into that, making those two, the disaster and infrastructures, almost like those set alone. You lose a bridge, you don't start cutting expenses, you go right to your reserve, at least thinking. But Sylvia and Regine, as we're kind of going through this, and I know you guys are probably making some notes. Maybe the 3 of us can get together and try to pull this together in some sort of format to bring back to the committee at the next meeting.
Happy to do that.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Charles?
I think just a couple points, Michael, since we're talking about this, is that we also have used the reserves in the past as a discretionary fund for building new projects, right? So the biggest example of that is the new city facilities. And so none of those qualify as a disaster or a bridge washing out. Those are purposeful dips into the reserves that we took in order not to go into debt or have a bond. So I think we should be thoughtful about how we characterize that as well, if that's the intention of using reserves in the future, or if it's not, right? If this council says, no, we don't want to do that anymore, then we just, we want to have these guidelines so we don't get into that discussion about using reserves to pay for infrastructure projects versus infrastructure repair, sort of concept. Yeah. I think the other thing that people are talking about revenue, we need to make sure when we're talking about revenue, especially triggers for this, is that revenue is a 3-month lag, right? So there's probably this concept of projected revenue loss versus actual revenue loss, because we are taking actions in the reserve, or at least council is, against projected revenue loss, which is an important thing to do. But waiting until revenue triggers something may be beyond the term that council wants to approach a problem. And so I just, in terms of crafting that language, I make sure that we're sort of thoughtful about if that puts any constraints, if we are saying revenue loss when we don't have revenue numbers, for some period of time, but we still want to take action.
Yeah, those are great points. I think the building thing falls maybe into the infrastructure discussion. But no, that's a good point.
Yeah, can I also, this is Wanda Reese.
Hang on, Charles. Charles, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead, and we'll get to you.
Wanda, you can say your piece. I'm patient.
Okay, Wanda. So the only thought I had, or just request I have, is some discussion also on the amount of our reserve. Right now it is equal to our budget, and so I will say, before I always thought, wow, that's a really big reserve. Now I don't think quite so much that way. But so I would like your thoughts, the committee's thoughts on, is that the right amount for our reserves?
I think it well may be when we bring up the issue of a hurricane that would totally destroy the shopping center. Then it would take at least a year to get it going again.
Yeah, and a reserve of a year might not carry us through.
That's exactly right.
I mean, I have always thought that our reserve was so large, but I do feel differently about it. So based on this.
Charles, go ahead.
Well, I think just based on the diversity of opinion that we're hearing tonight, this is something that would be very difficult to do. And I think it would be very impractical to do. And it would be, as you said, Michael, very dependent on the situation. I think the best thing we can do is just maybe put, as someone also suggested, maybe it was Charles Young, just maybe in the form of a set of questions, guideline, I don't even know, guideline seems a little too strong. But I think one thing that could be very beneficial when we actually get out from under this, I call it a plandemic, but this, whatever we're under right now, this disaster, if we document what we've done as a city, how we got ourselves hopefully back afloat, I think that little narrative could serve a world of good going forward if we ever find ourselves in another mess like the one we're in right now.
I think Charles makes a good point. If you've been through large events, and I've certainly not done anything like this in my life, but I find that sometimes pendulums swing pretty far the other way. So feelings are probably pretty raw right now. And so these items that we have on our agenda tonight are going to be driven, a lot of our discussion is going to be driven by what we're standing in right now. And I think that kind of maybe is something to keep in mind. Wanda, I think you make a good point. I wonder if, in terms of what a reasonable amount of reserves are, how would you cap that? Say 2 years worth of reserve, but that if it reached a certain point, then again, that drops into the category of reduced revenue, reduced expenses, supplemented by reserves. Kind of what we're doing now.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, and I don't know what the answer is, frankly. I was just looking for the committee's response to it. I mean, our next year's budget will be smaller, and so that means our reserve will be smaller. It'll be a smaller amount, and so, but if that's what it takes to operate, that's probably acceptable. So I'm just kind of thinking through this, and as we go through this, and seeing if that's the right number. So.
No, good points.
Michael, may I have a
Terry?
comment? Yeah, I was an elected official when we set up the emergency reserve, and the initial thinking was catastrophic event, and then the pandemic certainly fits that criteria. What from the discussion, what I'm hearing is that people want to add more detail as to what qualifies as a catastrophic event. And the reduction of revenue past a certain point, et cetera. In terms of using it to build infrastructure, it was never intended for that. Of course, by that I mean like the new buildings that we needed. And so that's a decision council could make, is going forward, do they want to use that for those purposes. There's other places we go to. Say that the tornado did come through and wipe everything out. Well, a lot of the equipment, et cetera, is going to come out of the replacement funds. And there's about $1 million there now, I think, something like that. So the reserves, emergency reserves, aren't the only place we go to when we have that kind of disaster, where it absolutely knocks down buildings and et cetera. So that's for Wanda, to keep that in mind, that there are other dollars that would come into play if it were just catastrophic.
Oh, absolutely. Have some healthy funds. So.
Yeah. I think somebody commented when we first started this isn't going to be easy.
Yeah. Michael, based on what you said and what Charles Goyer said, I think you both made very good points about maybe, we need to be careful about not swinging too far in the other direction from where we're at. And this is something we need more time to think about. I think it's important, but maybe it's premature to try to change it right now.
Yeah, I think at this point, Charles, and I have a tendency to agree with you. It's a work in progress, right? We're just beginning to see all the variables that are out there. I think it's going to take several meetings of us kind of chewing through it and thinking about it and coming back to the table going, well, what about this and what about that? Try to help the council as much as we can with the rabbit trailing. What are good variables? What are not good variables as we make that suggestion, so that it's well worked through. I hadn't anticipated we would pass a policy tonight. I would be surprised, but I didn't think that would happen. But I do agree with you. It's kind of a starting point.
Well, I kind of agree. My thought was that we've been through quite a crisis here, about as bad as it could get, without the buildings in the retail space being destroyed. And so I'm asking myself the question, maybe we ought to think about the question, as to what's wrong with the year that we have now. If we don't know yet what our revenues are going to be, so I don't know how we can really make a decision until we know better how much we have lost and how low they are now. We may find that we're still in quite a position of deficit going forward, and we'll have to be forced to go into the reserves and for a reasonable need. But I don't see that anybody has stated why the year reserve that we have now is a problem.
Agreed. Like Wanda said, I think it's new territory, and we're just kicking that ball back and forth, going, well, it's all speculative, right? We're kind of looking in the crystal ball, going, well, what would be a good number? Would a year and a half? Is it too much? Is it too little? But maybe that revenue reduction, expense reduction, that correlation, supplemental by reserves.
Well, we have no more information now than we did when we decided on a year. We don't know what our deficit going to be. So why don't we just say that we think it, at the current level of information we have, that we leave it at a year, period?
Well, why don't we do this? And I agree, Dr. Browning. Thank you for that. Let's kind of take what little bit we've got here now and kind of flush out some of those categories,
Mr.
put something
Chairman,
for you guys to look at, and we can bring
Mr.
that back.
Chairman,
Hang on. Would that be okay?
Michael?
Alfonso?
Yes. I think that at this moment it's important, and I am glad that I have a lot of people with good ideas, but if at this moment we still with $5.2 million, do we know how much money we will be using? So we will be using 30%, 50% of the $5.2 million.
Yeah,
So
we don't.
we need to decide how much we will be using. Now, the following months, I hope, and I am optimistic, they will be much better. Because if at this moment the calculations was with 20% income from revenues, I hope that will be a little going up. So with that 20% income, how much money we will be using for reserves? So we need to define at this moment how much, because we are talking a lot and we don't know how much money from that $5.2 million. So after that, in the following months, if we don't see that we recuperate, we will go 30%, 40%, maybe 50%. Well, perhaps we need to go to some areas where we will have some revenues. And if we will go with utilities or we will go with other kind of things, I think that the citizens will cooperate. But first, we need to be sure what we are doing, because we are talking and it's good, but also the time is moving. And at this moment, the city council expect to have some ideas, but I don't know, Michael, if you know how many months or how much money we will be using from reserves or general fund. Do you know, Michael?
I don't know. None of us
Oh,
until we begin to taper off until the revenue, until it all settles
So,
down. We're not going to know how much.
how we can say at this moment, then we will say, don't spend more than 30% of the reserves if we don't know. So first we need to set some points, and we know how much we calculate, we predict for the following 6 months. Okay, we need to see what happened. I hope that will be much better than that 20%. And in that way, we can be moving. And if we need more money, we need to find a way, in the same way that they are talking utilities or this or that, but we need to have with basis, not only that we propose and we will do this as a Mickey Mouse equation, has to be properly, and the same with the decision that we will take of how much we will have for the next 6 months of funds in the 5 points, I think it's $5.2 million. This is that we have at this moment as a residual. And from that residual, I don't know, perhaps we will be using 6 or 7 months and we will have again 5 months. Well, with that 5 months, it's a little risky. So we will propose at that time how we can make it. So this is how I can see that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think too, Alfonso, what we're thinking is we're thinking ahead, right? Obviously, the council now has to govern over the current situation and make those decisions on how to supplement revenue, and they haven't come back to us and asked for any. But this policy, because we actually started talking about this before the bottom dropped out. We've talked about it a couple of times. It's in the long range financial plan, but we've never pulled the trigger on having the conversation about what defines a reach into the reserve. So good points. Anything else there before we move on to the next item?
I'd like to make one more point.
Charles?
Based upon what Alfonso just got finished talking about, I heard a little bit different message from where I think we were going. Alfonso seems to be addressing the situation at hand. So maybe that would be a better approach for finance, to make some recommendations on how city council financially weathers this storm. not general policy about how to weather a storm in general, but this particular storm. That way we can be more specific, with the matters at hand and not anticipate different other scenarios that we have to take into account. It's a specific situation, and we give them the best advice we know how, considering, well, I shouldn't speak for myself, but that the experts are here in this committee with regard to financial matters, and they could provide a service for City Council.
Michael,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think the Finance Committee will need to look at changing recommendations for the policy. Right now, the policy says maintain general government fund balance equal to 100% of budget revenue for the preceding fiscal year. Alfonso is correct. This year, we had 5.2 million projected as our revenue. But then when we start the budget this year, this policy says we're starting with 5.2 million as our projections. We can't. We have no idea what we're going to have. So we will set ourselves up for failure if we continue with that policy. So just like you recommended at the beginning, you could start with that policy, but say if a tornado hits after the budget process, then to have 50% of budget revenue for the preceding year, or whatever number you want to put in there. Thank you.
No, those are good points. And I think when we get down to the budget discussion, it's going to be interesting to figure out how we move ahead and pull together a budget next year based on all these unknown variables. Will be a challenge for us. Thank you, Rudy. All right. Anything else then on the reserves? So we'll kind of flesh something out and then bring that back to chew on it a little bit more. All right, let's move on to the long-range financial plan. Speaking of conundrums.
So I have to ask, can we do, I'm not saying this to be provocative, it's a serious question. Can we do a long-range financial plan right now?
Sylvia and I swapped some emails today, and I think Ray Jean, and you got, I don't even know how we could.
No.
We can't. I mean, I don't even,
No.
So,
No.
However, I will say this, that we're mandated as the committee to bring a recommendation back to the council. So I think at a minimum that we would formalize some sort of position on this policy for.
I think we lost Michael.
I think we lost him too. Yep, he's offline. He'll come back online here in just a sec.
Are we on?
There you go. Lost you for a second. There you go.
Are we still on?
Yes.
Okay. And that maybe that's the way we handle that we don't take any action. I'm not sure even where to begin, Charles. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm with you. I read through this and thought, where would we even begin?
It's hard to believe we could do a long-range plan for at least a year, if not longer.
Yeah, when we can't even see 6 months down the road.
Right.
That is true.
Yeah. So, having said that,
What's the right word? Table the motion?
Mm-hmm. Motion to table.
Second.
well, do we? Okay, well, thanks for that.
Can I say something?
Of course.
So we're not, I don't think table is the right thing. I think we want to make a recommendation to the council to postpone a long-range financial plan until a year down the road or something like that. Because tabling it just makes like we're going to talk about the same thing again later. But if we really want to make a recommendation to the council that we're just going to postpone this until after COVID-19 and after the new budget process and work on it next fiscal year.
Regine, I was going to
Okay.
mention something.
Hold on, Rudy. Hold on. So the motion was to table, and there was a second. Is there any other discussion on the motion on the table?
I withdraw my second and make a motion that we recommend to the council that we wait a year or till we have more information.
On the seconder to the main motion, is the seconder in agreement with withdrawing the motion?
I was the second.
Who made the main motion?
I did. John.
John did. Okay, so they've both withdrawn. Dr. Browning's made a second motion to.
Wait a year.
I'm sorry, I don't know the difference between waiting 6 months and waiting 6 months. It's the same thing to me, so I don't care.
And actually, there is no official action that's called postpone. It is tabled to a time certain, and that time certain can be 12 months.
Excuse me?
Rudy?
Do I have the floor? Okay. Our policy is that we have to review the long-range financial plan on a yearly basis after doing the budget. We did the budget. We postponed this already because we were supposed to have this done last year in 2019. So we could say we're done with it as of March 2020, and then a new one to be done after this budget. So at least you've done your policy requirements. Your requirements are to do a long-range financial review each year. You reviewed it, you did your requirements before COVID-19.
Rudy's correct. The policy does say that we will make a recommendation to council. That's why I was thinking perhaps our recommendation should be, given the current situation, that the Budget and Finance Committee is going to withhold action on the long-range financial plan until the next budget year.
Well, that's basically the essence of my motion. You can just add or I said because of the current situation, and we review it again in a year when we have better information.
Regine, can you read the motion back?
Hold on. So, to recommend to council, due to the current situation, the finance committee will hold off, and then that's why I quit writing. I didn't get the rest of it.
Can I point
The first one.
The agenda item does not say to make recommendations to city council. It says to review and discuss.
Okay, John's made a good point. Oops. It should say discuss possible action.
And I think what the committee was doing was updating the report, the long-range planning report. What is required by council is that to approve that the budget fit into our 5-year, our long-range plan, and yes, it did. So I think we met that. So I think that was the difference. We were just updating it, and we need to hold off on updating it a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if there's no other discussion, the motion and second.
My motion was to table the motion.
Agenda for an action, we really can't take action. So we'll just let that one lie.
Sylvia?
Yes.
Is that something that you could just report in your administrative department report that, or Wanda could give it in a liaison report that we're not going to update it at this time, we're going to wait a year after the crisis passes and do it next year? Could that be done that way?
Yes, because this isn't even an action item tonight anyway. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, we're on to committee. Everybody okay with moving on to 6? We're going to discuss the repair and replacement fund.
I'd like to start that.
Yes, ma'am.
So I mentioned this to Michael earlier. Susanna, our new accountant, has experience with capital assets and capital assets. It's a lot of experience with that, which what she did a lot at Travis County. And so my recommendation on this is to just for this budget year, just to leave the money that's in there, which I believe is around $800,000, give or take. Don't add anything. Don't do anything. Just leave that money in there. If we bought everything that we needed, we'd have to spend that much, and we're not planning on buying everything. And let Susanna have some time to work on that. Learn what we have, what we need. That whole policy, and let her come up with a new updated 21st century plan. We've been using the plan that we have before I came, which is over 20 years, and
Amen.
it needs to be updated and it needs to be looked at. And so that's my recommendation on the reserve policy.
On equipment repair and replacement, you mean?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
I have a question. Is this the same list of items that we entertained last year at budget time? Has this list been changed in any way, shape, or form?
No, we have not added on to anything this year that was going to happen in the budget process. But we were going to have to talk about. We were talking about the length of life we had in there, putting in a cost of living increase for the replacement cost and all those things. And Suzanne and I were talking about a little bit today, and she's got some ideas, I think, and I think it would behoove the city to wait and not try and do something the old way when she could probably help with something new and improved. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I really believe that would now is the time to do it when we're changing the budget process, and she's got new blood and there's money in there, so it's not like we can't replace anything if we needed to, and let her look at it and see how it can be improved.
Terry?
Susanna, do you want to chime in at all on the discussion?
I like the idea.
I'll make that in the form of a motion that we let Gene and the new person review it and bring it back to us when that's completed, so that we can make a more reasonable decision.
Yeah. Dr. Browning, it's just not on as an action item. We can talk with the staff and formulate a process, but there's not formal action.
So
Michael, may I provide some background?
Terry?
Yeah, I was an elected official when we created the replacement fund. And the idea and what enabled us to do that was that the city's revenues were greatly exceeding our expenses. So it was an opportunity to take those revenues that were in excess of need and set up replacement funds, et cetera, so they wouldn't hit the general fund in the future, where council wouldn't be sitting down and trying to figure out how to come up with the money to replace a tractor or whatever, because we had it covered in that fund. Now, over the years, there are different items that have been incorporated into it that want to take the opportunity to separate them out. And one of the general problems for everyone with our budget process is the duplication of funds for similar, say, personnel items throughout the different budgets, which were handled like fund accounting. Each department had its own budget. There are items in the replacement fund that have to do with personnel, for example, that perhaps should be somewhere else. They're good items, they're important, but this may not be the place for them. The original intention behind this was to replace needed equipment, and it actually had in mind capital equipment, large items. Over the years, a lot of small things have also come in, like everything is in it at this point. So this is an opportunity to, I agree with Regine that this needs to be taken a good look at. Thank you.
Suzanne, you have any input?
I haven't really had a chance to look at any of this yet, but I do have some ideas and things that I would like to implement, if possible, mainly just like organization and like checking up and auditing some of the capital assets we currently have, and making sure that it all gets like put in the system correctly and we are able to like track it a lot better. But that's really all I have now without like really getting in depth and looking at it deeply.
One of the reasons that and thank you for that. One of the reasons we decided to revisit this is it was difficult to do at budget time. And so we wanted to do it at a time, Terry, and I think this falls into what you're talking about, when we could really look in detail what's in that and, how did it get in there? Why is it in there? Are the numbers real? A good example is with the changes in public works, we have 6 trucks. We used to have 11 people. Now we have 6 trucks and we have a vehicle for everybody. So maybe those sort of things need to be looked at and say there needs to be adjustments here in some of these items that don't need to be rebudgeted any longer. However, as the different department heads look at that we keep the same list in place. And then when we come back to re-examine that, here's the first one, here's our proposed second list, and here's the changes between the two. That things don't just get dropped off and then the new list gets brought forward and it's different than the old one that we're used to looking at. It's kind of along the same idea as a budget, right? Why is that item in there? What was its original intent? How did we come up with that number? And does it really still need to be in there?
I think too, Michael, the just even the policy on the repair and replacement itself. I mean, we just bought a backhoe that went through Public Works and those kinds of things. And I think probably Regina and I go back and forth on if you really, really dissected some of that equipment, it has a lot more usable life left to it. And we don't have any of those types of policies embedded within that particular fund.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Sylvia, and I appreciate that. One of the things I've always wondered about, what are the mileage? How many hours are on some of that equipment that we replace? And evaluating it, yeah, that's a really nice widget we've got there, but we've had it for 5 years and it has 5 hours of running time on it. So it seemed to be a good decision at the time, and I just made those numbers up. But in retrospect, it's still on the list to buy a new one when it reaches the end of its economic life, but we've only run it for 10 hours. Does that make sense? I mean, just doing that analysis, because some of those don't go by mileage, they go by hours run. And the equipment tracks that. And that's the backup that we would normally have in a budget behind every one of the items, but we don't have that here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had the same issue with how many trucks and how much equipment we have. Makes one wonder if maybe we've got more than we need. And that was my other thought that Michael brought up, is mileage, hours used and so forth. I'm currently using the John Deere tractor. It's built in 1960 and it runs great and it works better. And it's stronger than the new tractors.
Yeah.
Another thing that I agree with Dr. Browning on that. Another thing we should look at is the consumables. There are consumable items in this replacement fund, and they shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Consumables.
Like what? What do you say? I didn't know we had any consumables in there.
Yeah, well, take a look at it, John. Read through the detail of it, and you'll see them.
Okay.
Hey.
And some of them,
you're right.
It needs to have some sort of dollar threshold. In there, for example, there's a $30,000 fence. Well, I don't know that needs to be capitalized and run out. And that's an accounting issue, Wanda. I mean, for us to decide what's in the city's best interest on how we run those out. Some of those things can be just done in general revenue. So don't, and like Terry said, I'm not sure why they're on that list. Anyway. Okay. So everybody good with just kind of hitting the pause button on that one as well? Because we're going to get to that point in the budget process for that conversation. And this was an opportunity for us to visit that prior to. And I appreciate your diligence on that. All right. Any other conversation on that? On to number 7, discuss the utility fund rates, cost, and this is on as a discussion item. repair, replacement, infrastructure costs, reserve, and cost of services rate study. There's a couple of items that are in that line item. So if you want to kick this one off.
So obviously, in this recent budget change, we have foregone any transfers to the utility for the infrastructure and also to the utility fund itself that were customarily done, and also to reserve. But also what was cut was the cost of service rate study. So moving forward, as we talk about budget planning and we talk about future forecasting, obviously not just cutting expenses, but then you have to find alternate revenue sources. So there's been a long discussion over the years on, are we charging appropriately? Are we charging our commercial and residential customers according to Public Utility Commission? And what is the real subsidy? Is it water? Is it trash? Is it wastewater? And what are our real infrastructure costs? Where have we done our true due diligence in, for example, televising lines and those kinds of things to tell me what really needs to be repaired, as opposed to projections? I'm at the point that I would really love to see actual plans for projects moving forward, and I can give you a cost of what that is. I almost have to come backwards in this regard, because we have very extensive spreadsheets on streets and valves and lines and those kinds of things. In order to prioritize, in order to understand what I really need to change and what things really cost, I've got to get my hands on that. So Public Works has started to go through some of that. They did that this past week. Coupled with that is the rate, the water rate, the wastewater rate, the solid waste rate. If the general fund continues to have issues, the utility fund is an enterprise fund. In governmental accounting, those enterprise funds are meant to subsidize the general fund. Perfectly legal, perfectly legit, happens all across the country. To what extent is what Sunset Valley is going to have to weigh in? To what extent is it comfortable transferring from the utility fund to the general fund? And then beyond that, what impact does that have on that infrastructure upkeep, on everything else that utility fund truly is meant to take care of, that distribution of clean water and wastewater and those kinds of things? So Wanda's sponsoring, Councilmember Reitz is sponsoring an agenda item, I believe on the 19th, Councilmember Reitz, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to let her finish chiming in now.
So part of what I was looking at is just understanding what all went into, I mean, there's a lot of talk about what these subsidies are and what goes into each fund. What's in the water fund, what's in the wastewater, what's in the solid waste fund. And so I'm kind of picking it apart and looking at what's in there. And one of the factors is salaries. For example, I'm just going to throw this one out, whether it's good or bad, but we have public works salaries allotted to these funds. And I think there's some backup on that Regine put together. And so that's a budget assumption that was built into it. And so my thought process was, is this the correct budget assumption that needs to be put into it? So kind of my first thought is like, let's get a real accurate number of what these funds or what these utilities actually cost us. You know, what is the true cost of our water? What's the true cost of our wastewater? What's the true cost of our solid waste? Solid waste is probably the easiest one to do because that's pretty contractual. So there are, you know, part of it is to go in there and do kind of that deep dive. What's all in there? What's all in this budget? And then the second thing is to look at it, and in particularly look at, you know, these subsidies. There's a lot of myths about these subsidies out there, you know, and so who is really getting subsidized? What is a subsidy, et cetera. And so what I really wanted to understand as I did kind of my deep dive into it is what was in that budget, how did it get in that budget, and if we needed to look at other options, what are our options? So that's kind of the start of where I'm at. And so I will have a presentation in 2 weeks to the council. It's more informational. There's no action. for it, but looking at what these budgets contain, and it's kind of a educational process. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. That's exactly what needs to be done. I'm glad to hear that that's happening. I was looking at the revenues, and something that really struck me is utility is usually an enterprise fund, but we're subsidizing it from the general fund for infrastructure, for utility infrastructure. And let's just put the subsidies kind of in a neutral place. So there's $116,000 in revenues from transfer from general fund to support the infrastructure of that business. It seems like that should be in our rate structure. Any business, it would be in the rate structure, even if the citizens, the city made the decision to increase the subsidies by $115,000 to offset the rate increase that pays for infrastructure. It just seems like good, sound business that business of utilities should be charging for its infrastructure costs.
Harry, you're absolutely right. And the Public Utility Commission would give you an amen after that, because the Public Utility Commission, one of the basic premises is that the lines and the distribution and the system itself belong to the ratepayers. And so the ratepayers are supposed to be paying in to support that fund. But the way we have it set up in Sunset Valley, it's not even an enterprise fund. It's hardly a special revenue fund.
Well, Wanda, so if yours is just an informational presentation to council, do we want to wait until that's over with to find out what council wants us to do?
Well, I'm not sure there's action to be taken, but it's probably it's something that I want all of you to be involved with and understand it very completely, because I will say, this is the first time I've ever seen in my 5 years of doing budgets, I have ever seen the actual salaries that go into these funds. And so there's some detail in there that needs to be addressed. There's some detail, I think, in the infrastructure system. I mean, we went in and last year changed from I believe a 30-year replacement, and we changed it to a 40-year replacement. So that was kind of an interesting thought process, how that happened. So does that mean we need to look at that schedule a little more closely? I don't know. Maybe it's fine. So, there's just a lot of things I think we need to really dig down, and this is a good time to do it.
Well, there was a couple things that you covered there. One, we have looked at salaries before, and mostly the placement of the percentages is done on a time benefit analysis that staff did. It has been a while since we've looked at that. I will agree with you there. And of course, the 30 to 40 year change was based on Katie's recommendation, and the committee passed it and council passed it. So, if we want to go back to that, we can.
Michael?
The implications are pretty huge.
I'm not suggesting that we have to go back to it, but I'm suggesting that we look at the detail. I don't recall ever seeing salary detail in my 5 years. So, and then I just in looking at it. So, I mean, which I think is perfectly appropriate to allocate.
Sure.
So I think it's just trying to understand the most accurate number possible.
Sure. No, agreed completely. I'm all for. I think I've always said we need to pay our fair share, and if some of the ratepayers are not doing that, and if it needs a complete overhaul in terms of the system, this is the time to do it, and maybe start having the ratepayers pay their fair share.
Chairman?
Alfonso?
Yeah, Michael, I was thinking that perhaps at this moment they mentioned about the streets and the water and wastewater utilities, all the repairs and the maintenance. I think that when they started that in 2012, I think was a good idea and was excellent idea, and that gave it to us a good direction. But we learned with the time, and a lot of things they changed. They had a lot of value. At this moment, they they are open. The city they will hire engineering service. So you will have a company that they will study. As at this moment, the city administrator she mentioned that sometimes some of the lines perhaps they don't need to be replaced or something. Well, now with the engineer service, a lot of that kind of things they will have some basis, and perhaps the will be a lot of change because it's not that in this street we made this and in 7 years we will do it again and later in another 7 years again. Perhaps no, because now they will be watching in different with different criteria, and we will have a big difference. So we have funds, then they have $6 million for repairs. This is in the streets, and we have over $4.5 million in water and wastewater. So we are so lucky. I think that sometimes we need to be more optimistic. It's very difficult, the situation. The old people, when I say old people, not Terry, it's the guys that they were before.
Careful, now you're treading on thin ice.
No, including yourself, Michael. You were doing your job.
Old?
You were doing.
I don't know, no old here. But...
you were doing a very good job because you were worried about the city. So when I was looking, Helen and Quintanilla, Terrence, all of that, Mills, the other lady, I don't remember her name, but was also good people. And now with Cardona, I hope that Rosie, the mayor Cardona, had the experience that now she has, because she was a Rocky lady there. But now she support and she was doing incredible. But in a few words, if we have $20 million in reserves, it's for you. You were doing incredible job. I don't believe that you cannot see that in other cities. Then they have a lot of debts and a lot of things, and we need to wait. So if we will have engineering service, they need to be watching all of that funds. 5 million over close to $6 million in the streets, over 4.5 million in water and wastewater, and in the same way other funds. So here, I think that the ideas they are welcome. But I think that also the city council with the city administrator, also they are thinking how, and this is why they will hire that engineering service. So this is that I was looking. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfonso. Rudy? Rudy?
I wasn't speaking.
I thought you raised your hand, sorry.
No, sir.
Okay, anyone
Michael?
else?
Me?
Yeah. Oh, Ray-Jean, I'm sorry.
That's right. So I sent you an email earlier, and as one of the old people, I really believe that we need to come up with a plan on how to look at this. Because over the many years that we've been dealing with utility fund, everybody's thrown out these ideas, and this gets done, this doesn't get done, this might get done. So I really think that maybe Sylvia, because she's got a lot of experience in that, and I, and maybe someone else, we need to come up with a plan on how to approach looking at all of this stuff have a goal. What's the end result going to be? What are we doing? Instead of just, like Wanda was saying, we need to look at the salaries. What is that breakdown? What is that thing? We need to look at the other expenses. Are they all true expenses? But I think we need to have a plan as to how we do that. Like, almost like a checklist. Okay, well, this meeting we're going to check on salaries and R&M systems and what, so that we can make sure we discuss everything, get everything in there, put the cost of studies, the cost of service study into play and stuff like that. But I think without a plan, we're not going to get where we want to get again. And so that is something that I'd like to really work on, and I think that's a good idea. I know there's a lot of good ideas out there, but let's get it on paper as a plan and work down that plan. And I think we can come up with the result that we need to come up with, whatever that may be. But that's my idea. That's all.
Can I ask a question? Because I think I'm
John?
getting lost. Why?
John?
What is the aspect of salaries that is an issue? I don't know what you guys are saying.
Well, I don't think it's an issue, John. The fact that the utility fund covers the salaries of those staff who help manage the system, that's not an issue. I think what Wanda is just saying is that we review what those weighted salaries are within that system, and then possibly take that out of the equation to find out truly what it takes to run the utility system, just distribution and purchase of water and all of those things, and then add salary. Is that correct, Wanda?
Yeah, and I think it's perfectly appropriate to put salaries in there. I just would like to see what that accurate number is. I don't, in looking at it, the breakout now, I'm not sure I agree with how it was broken out, but, I am just one person. And I think it just needs to be revisited to see what is the actual cost.
Wanda, do you mean like the breakdown between wastewater and water?
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I know what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Well, yeah. For example, I'm just gonna put something out here. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or incorrect or whatever, but it says like the administrative assistant spent 20% of their time in water. Now, is that accurate? I don't know. And so, and then you have a lot of salaries through the maintenance tech, and is that accurate? I really don't know.
Yeah, it looks for the most part like they're trying to match it with the actual expenditure, right? There's more money in water than wastewater.
Yeah.
My bigger concern is we have $4.5 million in that fund, and yet we're treating our one lift station and limping it along, and it's being held together by chicken wire, just about.
Yeah, I don't get that.
Me either.
I don't get that either. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't know why.
Me neither.
That's something that would come out of Public Works. That, hey, it's time to pull the trigger on that. I'm not sure why we haven't done that.
And we will. That's the Public Works Committee identified that as a priority because staff raised the white flag the other day and said we can't keep just kind of limping it along. I mean, it has things. I mean, it's missing very critical things like towels and things from the hotel are making its way into the lift station. We're just missing some critical grates that there's no reason for that to have happened. So I think a good review, what are we spending? What are our maintenance costs is long overdue. And that, I mean, Regina and I can help with that. I think that's going to be a Budget and Finance and Public Works Committee joint venture. But definitely there's some dissection in this fund that is worth looking at.
Regina and Rudy, and I think Wanda's right. Now that we've talked about, because we've a couple times over the years have gone back and said to staff and said, what are the percentages of allocations? But I can't remember the last time we did that.
I can't either. So, and I've been doing this for 5 years now, but I really can't remember ever doing it. So I think these were like some old numbers at some point, but I think it just needs to be looked at.
Yeah. It's us old people.
It's us old people But again, I think now's the time where we need to really look at every little thing, and I really think the plan, there's got to be a plan, because for so many years we've just thrown this out, just thrown that out, just thrown this out, and there needs to be a plan of how we can get through it so that we can actually complete the task of the utility fund, because it's been out there wishy-washy for many years.
So why don't we?
Regine, I just want to reassure you not to worry about the old people, because I've already got the medal for that. In November, I'll be 84. And I'm excited to talk about the next 7 years and the next 14. It energized me.
Those young whippersnappers.
Those young whippersnappers, right.
We're the pillars of the community. So here's a thought. I don't know that we're going to change the rate structure anytime soon, but as we begin to move toward the budget time, that we could do some things. And Sylvia, think with me out loud, having some experience with this as well, that we do go back to Public Works and say, okay, we'd like that time and motion study again to reallocate the percentage of those funds that are in those. That we, I was also very hopeful for the water rate analysis, but I understand they put that on hold. The thought process was behind that. We've done that in-house a couple times, and it always gets discredited. That staff didn't call the right places, that staff didn't, and so it muddled the water. So the idea was, let's bring in some outside party who's not, for some reason, I don't know. Anyway, that was the thought process behind that, is substantiating the rate structure, which, and talking to Sylvia too, that Water Commission does require that from time to time. So that,
yeah, I think
it. Process. Go ahead.
I would agree I think the rate study is a good idea. Although what I understand is that the last time they did the rate study is that we gave them the budget assumptions. So one of the things we need to do before we do a rate study is to look at what are actually our costs, and then give them make sure it's accurate. So
I'm troubled by the fact that we have the funds to fix the lift station, and for some reason we're not pulling the trigger on that. So it makes me want to question the policy for how that's been handled, whether the error's been on our side or is that an internal issue. You know, we budget for when police cars need to be bought, and we buy those like this, public work, whatever that might be. But something as critical as a lift station, does that make sense? I'm really troubled by the fact that we've somehow had this impression that we need to limp along when that's
it's
not
internal.
the case.
That was an internal issue.
So somehow that process needs to be looked at and make sure that's more formalized and not left to be arbitrary. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but somehow a mindset was developed that we need to keep limping along here and not fix this thing. So that didn't make sense to me. So time and motion study for staff on the salaries, looking at an internal process on how we expend capital expenditures in water and wastewater.
Those are items that need to be added to the plan.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
Yep, I know.
And we need we really need that rate study, but that's been hit. That's caught up in the pause button.
Well, I mean, the Budget and Finance Committee could recommend
that funds be released
as a priority. You could recommend that this is a priority.
Terry, you might be speaking, but nobody can hear you.
Can't hear you, buddy. You do sign language?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you in regard to the lift station. That lift station's over here close to my house.
Yeah.
And,
Terry, you would be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, it says it's going to flood. It's going to flood my yard when it backs up. And
it runs downhill.
On the costs, we have lots of data historical data on consumption, on how much we use, and we buy it all from City of Austin. City of Austin has a rate structure that we should reference. We should at least look at it as we design our own rates. And maybe we can save $20,000 in the process.
Well, no, Terry, because I'm going to tell you the City of Austin rate structure, because I manage the City of Corpus Christi's rate structure, and that spreadsheet is probably over 200 tabs long because there's debt, because there is distribution, and then minus out what they sell to wholesale. That rate looks nothing like ours. Absolutely nothing like ours. Ours would be much, much, much simpler.
Okay, well, I've got a house in the City of Austin. I can give you a copy of the utility bill. And that's pretty simple and straightforward. I don't know what they charge for commercial.
No, the bill itself, yes, but what makes up that rate structure is there's a whole heck of a lot that makes up that rate structure. You would be amazed. And I know that we are going to get hit with an adjustment for the City of Austin. And so for those, also for those folks who said, oh, look, Austin's giving their ratepayers a discount. I said, where do you think that discount is coming from? It's coming from the utility fund, both from their staff that they didn't hire and vacancies, and that money was swept. It's coming from a portion of their reserve. It's coming from a portion that's not going to be contributed to the general fund. And that safety net that was passed on to the City of Austin ratepayers, trust me, will be paid by the wholesalers and the industrial customers.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman?
Just real quick, Alfonso, you may remember they didn't do a rate increase, but we knew that there would be one, and it doesn't mean they're waving it away. That it's just going to be a bigger adjustment than we'd seen in the past. Was that last year, Regine, or just in the last 2 years? You with us, Regine? Rudy, do you remember?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. What was the question? I missed that.
Was it just last year they deferred the increase, or the last 2 years?
2 years.
2 years.
So they haven't passed on a rate increase in 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah,
I think then the cost of the water we allocate and was a 12% increase and reduction in wastewater. So that was the proposal from the City of Austin. But I would like to say something about this study. When I try to say that is years ago we discussed that, and at that time I was talking with Katie, and when I was talking with Katie, I say, Katie, in the study that we have from 2014, they were asking for how much water you were using, the peak of the water per day. Do we have the peak hour? No. Do we have the peak days? Well, no. Do we have the weekends? Well, no. So if we don't have all of that numbers, they will do the study because they will make the money to make the study. But that will be with no validity. So we need to change. How many meters do you have? Well, we have 8 master meters. But which are the most important? 4 of them. Okay, so why we don't start checking? Well, Alfonso, I don't have people. Well, pay overtime weekends, and they need to read the meters. So they start reading meters weekends. So they try to log all the water that we were using in weekends, every day. And previously, we don't have that data. Why? The rate of the water all depends at what time you are using that water. So we have to have that peaks. A peak hour, the same the electricity is more expensive. It's the same the water. But we didn't have that numbers. Now, in this case, maybe the residents, as you see in that report from Texas Water Development Board, only 25% of the water is used for the residents. So, and when I was looking the numbers, the people is not using too much water. Only we have a few people that they use a lot of water, they abuse. So when you are doing one study, at this moment, perhaps the worst will be the commercial and the apartments. So for us as a residential, if you need to pay your fees, not only in water, wastewater, the most is in solid waste. In solid waste will be real high because we pay $1.77. If not, we will pay over $39 per month. So it's a big difference. So sometimes it's not so easy to say we will do this or we will do that. We have to make that properly with the waste of the water. If you see the city is, we still with unaccounted water. We need to start working with that. Yes, Michael, I know what do you say, and I saw the agenda, and I saw the rates, and I saw all of that. But I need to say something because I would like to, then the people, they will understand. And when they cut again the $20,000 for the study is for rate structure and cost of the service. And in cost of the service, it's not only the water. We have fire hydrants, we have valves, we have distribution. So it's a lot of things that we need to have. And if I am taking time talking, it's because I would like that everybody understand. I was doing that for 30 years. So it's not so easy. And in one moment, if some people at this moment, they pay only $9 for water is the fee and $4 per wastewater, we are so nice. And that people is working incredible. And perhaps some people is using above 30,000 gallons per day. So when we will do one study, you will see that some people will be paying in the order of $150 per month, but other people will be over $300 per month. But you need to have one study. So thank you, and I would like that everybody understand that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alfonso. And I realize that's your background. So I think we're also going to be relying on Public Works to give us some direction here when they pull together whatever the RFP is and what those items are we want to have looked at. I don't think we just say go ahead and do a study. I think your point is the analysis needs to be done on what is in that study. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
we need to follow the same study that was in 2014 was incredible, but they were using a lot of supposed, no real data, and they used some of the city of Austin. So in this case, is now we need to start using real data from the city of Sunset Valley. This is the intention, and it took time because it was very difficult also for the people in Public Works that nobody told them how do they needed to do, but they made it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Based on
Yeah,
what,
and that's the same conversation with water loss and those kinds of things. There's a lot of things that question. I mean, I think first and foremost, we need to get our, both feet on the ground. The meter change out process has been very slow. It's cumbersome. I'm not even sure that there was even a plan to get those in place. But in order to be able to understand what our water loss, he's right, what our peak water usage is and what we get charged during those times, it all get put in the rate. I don't know whoever said that our staff internally could do it because this is a very detailed study. But until we have some of that information pieced together, I'm not sure that we're going to get our money's worth. Let's just say that. It may be that part one, somebody has to come in and help us get that done.
Yeah.
yeah, I think based on what Alfonso said, I would question whether or not we have the resource knowledge to even put the RFP together.
It may mean that we need some consulting assistance to pull together a proper document. We obviously don't want to waste any money. I agree with you, Dr. Browning. So we just need to recognize, do we need assistance? Sounds like we do. And 20,000 may not be enough to give us a real feel for what the rates really should be. So Regine, in terms of you're asking for some pieces of the plan, so we talked about Public Works evaluating time spent. Wanda, are there other specific items that you're thinking?
That was the main one. I kind of looked through some of the other operational expenses, but there's some, I'm not sure I agree with some of them, but they're so small, it's not worth getting excited about, frankly. So that is, it's the salaries, and it's also just the rates that we charge. I would say solid waste is probably the most obvious one there. When we charge $1.77, I think it's actually $1.84 now. But you know, when our real cost is really closer to $30 or $40 a month. So yeah. So.
My question, can I ask a question?
John?
If you do a rate study that considers all aspects, the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of water, cost of solid waste, et cetera, and it comes back and says, well, you got to raise your income by another $500,000. I suspect that you probably will not increase the water bills by $500,000. Our water bills are a political decision, right? To subsidize, it's a political decision to subsidize water because that's the easy way, the way of choice, maybe the only way to help the folks, right?
Correct.
So what are you going to do with the rate study that comes back with a number that you're not going to use? You're going to throw it away. I'm sorry, that's what I believe. I can come up with a rate study that is, you know, how much to charge people. We could charge high users a little bit more. We could add $1 here, $1 there, but you're not going to add 500,000. I'll just put a period there.
Well, it would obviously need to be phased in, John, to some degree, and ultimately, and I agree with you. We've made those suggestions to councils before, and they've gotten tossed aside. Our role as the finance committee is to crunch the numbers and come back and say, here are the numbers. You guys decide what needs to be done.
But you don't need a rate study to do that.
That's fine. We can continue to subsidize. But I think our task is to come forward with real numbers and say, here's really what it costs to run the system.
Don't you have those numbers right now?
What other position could we take?
You know the numbers. You know how much money you spend on buying water and on solid waste and on.
No, we don't. No.
You don't?
Well, we don't know what we're paying at what time. That's what Alfonso just said. Costs are different at different times, and the rate study helps us completely understand what the cost of a gallon of water is based on what time of day it is, just like electricity.
Well, I think John is saying we know what we pay for water. I think I think that's what John is saying. We know what we pay for water, and wastewater is a function of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could easily correct those items.
Okay, 20,000 here, 20,000 there. You know, it's just money.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Sylvia. Didn't you say we're required to do a rate study from time to time?
Well, that was a Rudy question. There's every 5 years, and that's assuming you're going to do a massive change in the rate. If you're just going to make minor adjustments, then no, I don't think you can go past 5 years. So don't quote me on that.
And I believe our study was done in 2014.
Okay.
Everything I researched said that it was a recommendation, not a legal issue.
Okay.
Okay, good. So we have some leeway there.
When was the last time we reevaluated repair and replacement?
That's only been added to the utility fund in the last couple of years. That used to be in the general fund, repair and replacement, and then I think 2 years ago, Katie moved it to the repair and replacement, to utility, to drainage, and I think street.
I just meant in terms of what's in there.
Chairman, was in 2012.
2012?
Yeah.
So it's been a while since we've analyzed those numbers in terms of costs. Maybe that's another place to start in terms of a plan.
Another thing too, I think there was only one truck and the backhoe. Now, unless you're talking about the infrastructure. Are you talking about the infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm looking at the water repair and replacement.
Yeah, what that means on that is there's a backhoe and a truck. There's only a couple. I don't know how many things exactly, but there's only a few things on there.
I'm okay.
The water and wastewater replacement fund has the piping, rail, the trail, the lift stations.
It's okay.
It's on the last page of the second to last page.
Michael,
Charles?
just to jump in, everybody else has on this subject, but I mean, the way I feel about this whole business about subsidy, just the definition has problems of what that really means. And it's such a contentious issue. It's such a political issue, as John brought up. It's, what Alfonso said about the complication, about the fact that what Sylvia talked about, it may have to happen in the most efficient way in phases so we can really get our hands around this, understand it, and depoliticalize it. I think it's absolutely crucial. And Wanda was talking about, she kind of opened it up like, hey, do we want to make a recommendation to City Council to put this back as an expenditure so we can actually go move forward on this? I mean, I think this whole business with water, wastewater, waste management needs to be, green waste needs to be addressed. I think it's one of the most central issues for us in terms of the contentiousness of it, probably second only to the uplands. And that's another sort of comparable scenario where, like the rate structure, we need to understand the problem, right? Just like with the uplands, we need to understand how much that property is worth and then go from there. What is most judicious? What makes most sense for us to use that resource in the most effective way? I think we got to do that with water. I think we need to make a recommendation to the City Council to get to work on this issue, whatever that's necessary. And I just wanted to throw out one little possible cost savings measure that may be, it would work for me. I don't know how it would work overall for the city, but with regard to to solid waste. And I know we got a contract, so it may not be a negotiable item, but if we elected to have solid waste pickup every other week rather than every week, I mean, potentially, if it's not a contractual obligation of such, that something that we can't get out of, that could be, we could save half of what we're presently spending right now for that service. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Regine, did you see what I was talking about? The last 2 pages, it's the water, wastewater repair replacement fund. That it looks
Mr.
like.
Chairman, was 2012, Mr. Chairman.
I'm having a hard time getting into it. Hang on, let me go a different route.
There's just a column there that says costs in 2013. If we haven't looked at that since 2013, those costs are not relevant any longer. And probably, Sylvia, would you agree, those need to be reevaluated as to whether those are true costs or not? So if we're trying to come up with a plan, that's something else that needs to be looked at.
Yes.
And I want to share,
What is the first thing on that line?
The lift station.
I can't get there.
It's
Hold on, go down.
Keep scrolling down. Not
Keep
up.
going.
I am.
Keep going all the way at the bottom, Sylvia.
Here, let me zoom in.
Keep going down. There we go.
There.
It says on there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I refer to that as the infrastructure replacement. Yeah, that's. So
Yeah.
those are the things we just looked at, and Katie and then y'all changed it to the 30-year. I mean, that was the last time we actually looked at that in detail.
Yeah, that's not my point. My point is that 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column on the left says costs in 2013.
Oh.
We have not looked at the cost basis in 7 years.
That's probably correct. I would have to say that.
Okay, well, that's probably another area that needs to be looked at. I'm just thinking out loud with everybody here. Those numbers are probably bogus, and that's Probably things can't be bought for that anymore.
Well, but if you'll notice, Michael, it looks like they inflated or they've got interest, or some sort of adjusted for inflation in the out years because that lift station repair that they got identified is 255,000 in 2020-21 when you add those numbers together. So it's not,
Yeah.
they're not using the cost to reflect the actual repair cost in the out years.
Yeah, good catch. I wonder what that increase is when you run that
Inflation.
out. What's that, John?
I believe it's an inflation number, like 3%.
It'd just be interesting to see if the trend is okay. Before it land until 2031. It's almost a 20-year run out. Anyway, if we could just look at those.
Will do. The council is set to appoint an engineering firm on Tuesday. So it's been my discussion with the council at my interview at the council retreat that our consultants, both legal, engineering, and anybody who works for us truly needs to act as an extension of staff, and they need to be able to give us direction on our needs and priorities, as well as, having some of that back and forth dialogue. But absolutely critical is a review of our infrastructure, a review of our needs, and then a prioritization that will fall in line with what we need to budget for, what we need to plan for, and what we need to save for.
I mean, that lift station's almost 30 years old.
Listen, if I took you down there, you'd be embarrassed.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay. I'm embarrassed that we haven't done it. Why did we wait so long? Okay. What else do we need to put in that plan, Regine?
So I have the infrastructure, look at that, salaries, the other cost, the water rates that we charge, Public Works Committee about the time spent on time spent. And we need to get the lift station fixed.
Let's get on over there.
So I think what I can do, starting with this list, Sylvia and I can probably sit down and we can create a preliminary plan and, see what kind of term we're looking at, see how long we think that'll take and stuff like that, and maybe bring something back to the next meeting. Sylvia, do you think we could do that? At least a starting point?
Yes, absolutely.
And John, I agree with you. There's some basic things we could do right away and just say, okay, we're going to all start paying the real cost of trash. That would be so simple.
Michael,
right? Instead of paying $1 or $2, that we would actually all pay for what it really costs to have the trash picked up. So there's some things we could do right away, but it seems kind of haphazard to me. It's up to the committee to make recommendations to council. We can put that on the next agenda. Something to think about and get started moving in that direction. You with me, John?
I'm with you. I'll wait for somebody to make a recommendation.
Well, it's not on for action, but we can put it on the next agenda if you'd like.
Okay. I just did some calculations. It looks like it is 3%.
Is it?
Yeah. That's my quick and dirty.
I think good
So
catch,
Michael?
Mark. I'm just wondering if the base for those numbers are really kept up with 3%. You know, if you start to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years down the road, did they really trend at 3%? I don't know. Regine?
So why don't Sylvia and I, so for the next meeting, Sylvia and I come up with a plan, and then we'll have at the next meeting, it'll be a action item to do something from the plan or whatever needs to be done, recommendation to council or something like that. And then at that next meeting, we can make some firm plans with actions.
Make recommendations.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. We're moving in the right direction. Thank you for that. Okay, our last item, we're pushing 8 o'clock. We're doing really well. Thank you for that. When we go to the timeline, we can talk about the budget process. This may be the one we all kill each other over.
Perhaps, perhaps.
Perhaps. Au contraire.
Good boy.
So based on a lot of the discussion over trying to balance the budget and making the cuts and those kinds of things, I've been talking to the some of the council members about a different type of budgeting process, and it's called priority-based budgeting. It is it's similar in what you do right now in terms of the budget and finance committee's involvement. Let me bring this up here. But it is very, very, very intensive resident commitment and involvement. So right now we do incremental, right? We do a projection, balanced budget, revenues equal expenditures. And then somebody had brought up, okay, well, we need to do a zero-based budget. Well, zero-based budgets aren't ever really possible because there are things we need to fund, period, like the purchase of water. And then priority-based is the community gets to say what they want their desired outcomes to be. And then we fund based on those goals, but also based on what we're required legally to provide. So this is the current process. The projections are developed. It's really heavy with staff and the Budget and Finance Committee. And then at some point, the committees give their requests forward. Staff is review and comment. Budget and Finance Committee also has comment. You develop a draft budget. The mayor reviews. There's some council input. There's community input at the council dais, and then the budget is adopted. I know there's a lot of back and forth in between that.
Sure.
So it's a Center for Priority-Based Budgeting. It's a whole, it's not just something that's off the cuff. More and more cities are using this, especially as resident engagement and transparency become the key words to how cities operate. So this is the proposed process. So we do have some tools now. We have Open Town Hall and Open Gov. So we first start with the community input regarding what their priorities are. And we use tools to get that. We rank, and the Budget and Finance Committee, as well as council and committees, rank what those priorities are. Now, we still do the revenue and expenditure projections by staff, and this is essentially, this is how much we have coming in, this is how much we absolutely need to fund, and this is what's left over to fund what the community thinks are priorities. We developed the draft budget based on that. It still goes to mayoral review and adjustment and council input, and then the budget is adopted. The difference is there's a lot more community involvement. And my discussion with this was, there was a lot of citizen comments about, well, I never saw, I never knew, why was this in there? I've never been involved, I've never attended, I need to start attending. And you guys have heard it all. I mean, it's no different. It's easier to throw a rock from the sideline than to actually get involved, right?
Absolutely.
So its advantages are, it is, we do have to spend on the legally mandated things first, fire, water, trash, those kinds of things. But then we get some direction from the committee, and it is truly from the community and the committees working together to put what they think their community should look like. I would love to tell you that I have performance metrics and I can give you organizational effectiveness right now, but the truth of the matter is I cannot. I can't tell you how many times we dealt with a water valve issue or those kinds of things because our work order system is not consistent. So then I've been told, well, what additional training is required? None. It really is listening. I mean, if I would tell you that I needed a skill that we needed to hone, that would be our listening skill. That would really be the additional training for staff. Will the new software support it? Yes. It'll give us the opportunity to model. Do other cities use it? Yes. The International City Managers Association is really trying to push toward a movement to performance-based, and it's truly for the resident engagement piece. What's the benefit to me as a resident? Well, you get to deem what's important. Can we implement it? Yes. It's a tight time frame, and that's what this process looks like for Sunset Valley. So in May, we'd have to start the resident participation and the council participation. And then in June is when the Budget and Finance Committee really gets their hands involved based on working with the projections the staff develops, working with those prioritizations, and really beginning to craft what the budget looks like. It's going to be a lot of joint committee meetings between Budget and Finance and the committees themselves and the residents. And then in July, we can model after those priorities come out. With OpenGov, I can give you just about any model. And the example I was using to Councilmember Reitz earlier was, you know, we may have a community segment that says, I don't want to spend money on salaries. I'd rather spend it on contractual expense. So cut salaries 50,000 and put 50,000 in contractual expense and raise this contract by X amount. Well, it's never a one-to-one. On the contract, I'm going to now tell you, well, you have $50,000 worth of work, but now I need to add an attorney cost who can oversee that contract and draw that contract up. I'm going to add accounts payable costs because now I have a bill that I need to pay on a monthly basis. So I'd be able to model those things and show you, you want to cut 50 here, but it's really going to cost us 57 over here or 60. And is that really worth it? Right? We can have some of those really transparent discussions. I believe we can still get to an August Budget and Finance and Council adoption, and I left room in September for that. There you go.
So what is the purpose of this? Do we need a motion or something to move forward one way or the other?
Well,
it's not on for an action item.
Yeah, no, I wanted to let the financing committee have a sneak peek at what the council is going to see, and two, what are your thoughts on the process? Is this something that sounds like it's doable for us? Is it something that you believe needs to happen, doesn't need to happen? It's the same squeaky wheels. I mean, I'm here to listen.
I think it's a great idea, and it's a way to change confusion into priority that's based on the citizen input. And if they don't have input, then we can keep moving forward based on the priorities that we have heard or assumed to be. But it certainly looks like a stepwise process would be much better than what I see now. And I would highly support it.
Hello, Michael?
Alfonso?
Yeah, we suppose that we can start with this process. This is the idea. It has May, June, July, August. We will start with this?
Well, there's still some questions, Sylvia. As chair of I'm still really lost and unclear about this new process. There's not been any clarity for us in terms of what that's going to look like, other than, and don't misunderstand this, that, oh, the new system will allow us to modeling, but there's so much in our budget book that backs up all those items and what the history is, the justification for those, how you leave that or how you reformat that so that we, and I get what you're talking about in terms of the modeling, and that's fine. But there still has to be, and if I'm missing something, some process where we step through all of those items to do that analysis. Now, having said that, I like what I saw in here because my thought was, well, how would we approach this? And you're right. It kind of goes back to that conversation of what are those different tiers? Obviously, we have to provide fire. We have to provide public safety. So those are the foundation blocks. Okay, these things go in first no matter what. Then the next step up is, and then the third step up is subsidies and those kind of things. That makes sense. So I think that was my thinking. And so I think I saw that in one of the slides. So as in terms of directive to the staff, here's how you build your budget that you bring to finance. And that on that same thought, we still don't know how this income number is going to. Hold on. We still don't know how this income number is going to play out. I don't know how you can come up with numbers in the next 90 days of what our budget's going to look like next year. And it may
So,
be we go to a point and say, you know what, we're going to have to keep burning reserves.
yep. So this is just the base budget in OpenGov as Susanna scrubs the 5-year data history. You're going to see that 5-year data history lined up right next to this base budget. Then you're going to have, we actually even have another column that we need to add, and that's the COVID amended budget. The council will be getting the amended budget on the 19th. We forget that there's a legislative action that needs to happen to amend the budget. So we have 20 base plus 20 amended COVID, and then we have 20 proposed. So the beauty about being able to model any changes is as we make a change in priority, for example, and we raise that priority and we decide to fund that, I can give you a model of what that expense actually looks like. This isn't built out completely, but I mean, I'm just gonna show you briefly what I'd be able to show you. I can drill down into what those things are. So if the council, I mean, if the committee says, hey, we need to fund more in contractual services, then I'm gonna tell you, well, you know, this pie chart's gonna change here. Do we really wanna do that? Because it's gonna offset a cost over here. It's the ability to have real-time data as you're talking to your constituents, as you're building the budget. It doesn't change the budget process and looking at the history. We are bringing all of that history in from the MIP process. It does not change that at all. What it changes is how fast we can make decisions. What it changes is a community that doesn't say, I never had a say in what this budget was. I didn't know we were spending. I didn't know we were going to have to cut. I didn't know my utility bill was going to come up.
Yeah.
Did anybody understand that?
Mr. Chairman?
Alonzo?
Yes. I was looking this and sounds and I can hear it so well and looks good. But this is another program. And what happened? The philosophy of a zero budget came from some cities where we didn't have any money, nothing. And we tried to go from the beginning. And from the beginning, we tried to justify every coin that we had. And also, we have some parameters that they gave it to us, the justification of that expenditures. In my times, I am a little younger, and at that time, we used to be working by hand. So, and when we came with I remember Lotus 1, 2, 3, wow, that was another planet. And our computer's 386, but we used to do that by hand. Now, the principle of zero budget is good. Sounds good. The only thing that I can see is the information, as you say, and the criteria. At this moment, look, and I am always in the same way, good or bad, but I will say it. I came to that committee 3 years ago. I have some disagreements, but I can see also a lot of knowledge, experience in some of yours, and I learn from your experience. So sometimes a program will be good according with the information that you will provide and the decisions that you will take. So this is not so easy. Now, looking this, I try to see the slides that we have in the agenda, and I couldn't see any of these. So I don't know, but if you see your, you cannot see that because perhaps I have another computer, and I am looking the other computer, and we don't have that slides. So I in order to have some consistency and be talking the same, I hope that they will add these slides, and I am looking here in the agenda that they presented. So in that way, it will be easy for everybody to read that.
I think it was in the package. It was in the package.
I went.
I'm looking at it.
No, I was looking that. This is This is agenda
Michael?
item number 8.
Yeah.
Agenda item number 8, and you go to the bottom, you will see all of that lines, and you have the priority-based budgeting, but they don't have all of that slides.
Oh, you're right.
Alfonso.
That is a presentation that's going to the council on Tuesday. It was simply for mention here.
Well, but look, this is why, Mr. Chairman, if we are here and we are talking about something, we need to be talking in the same way. So, because I study all of this, I read that. So, if at this moment I can see May, June, July, etc., I will have some idea. But in the way that I have here, I don't see that. Now, if that will be for the presentation of the City Council May number 5th, but also it can be for us, because I think that we are in the same way. That people, they have more responsibilities because they are the leaders of the city. But we are also part of this community, and we are the committee that will be watching that. And in long range, if they approve that, we will be working with that. So please, if they can attach these slides to that presentation, will be much better. But thank you. So remember, then you have to have the criteria and the experience of the people, because it's only a program. Very, very, very good, fast, but you need to know how you can fit that, and you need to adjust. So with long time will be incredible. But at this moment needs a lot of tune up. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Alfonso.
Gary? Yeah, I agree with Alfonso. My biggest concern is whether a system's, one of the concerns, whether it's computerized or it's done manual. If the data is bad data in, bad results out. And we've already gone over a lot of instances where we have bad financial data, outdated data, etc. The city is reeling from the shock of the pandemic and all the changes that's forcing us to make in a rapid period of time. This is a major change in process. I think it would take 2 years to implement this process. Now, the public input part of it, we can shortcut that because we have the infrastructure set up for people to participate. But the idea of learning a new process, putting in data that is not totally reliable in 2020, we have the problem of even needing to unsort this financial data and put it in the pigeonhole, so to speak.
So I think everybody's confused because we are going to be modeling in OpenGov anyway.
Hold on, Sylvia.
Yeah, this is not the time that we can adapt. We have the resources to adopt a brand new system. We can certainly have it as a goal and have elements incorporated as we go. But I think it's unrealistic to think we can set up and do this.
So
we're involved in everything else.
So so maybe you guys don't understand that we are doing the budget in OpenGov this year. We're set up that way.
That's not what we're objecting to, I think we're objecting to a big change in the process
So no
of how this is done. I don't think anybody's pushing back against putting the data in OpenGov.
Yeah, the change in the process is public input.
Yes, I heartily disagree with what's been said. It's like, I don't think the residents are as stupid as we're assuming they are.
Nobody is.
No one is assuming the residents are stupid.
It's like buying AT&T buys DirecTV and every other thing that's happened in terms of change. Change is happening and people are getting used to it. And what I hear you saying is that you want to keep something that we know that's broken and we're fixing it with the new software. All we're doing is getting better opportunity for residents to look at what the budget consists of and then tell us if they want to stay with the same priorities and give them an understanding of what the cost of these things are and how if we don't have the income, we can't support it. And so what would you like to change? We're not telling them we're going to change something. but how would you like for us to change what we must change because of what's going on around us? I think they could fully understand it, and we've already decided to go to the new Gov software, and it will be an opportunity for them to look at the numbers and understand them. They're almost non-comprehensible now.
That's correct,
Okay.
Dr. Browning. What I'm not objecting. You're pushing a process that I agree with, but you're saying people will look at the numbers and make decisions. Well, the numbers aren't good, so the decisions won't be good until the numbers are good.
Well, they're going to be the best we'll have for a time, and we have to do something. And it's an opportunity for them to get involved in the process so that at the end of a year or 2 years, then we have to make all these changes. We can bring them along in the decision process. They're the best numbers we can come up with, and they will continue to change, granted. But it's an improvement. It's not a step backward.
The numbers that would go into the modeling are the same numbers that you're going to be working on via paper in the old method.
I think that's the question, Sylvia. How do we get this into your new system? You know, I'm not clear on what the differentiation is. If the only differentiation is that the end numbers get put into some format, Dr. Browning, I don't think anybody's saying this is we don't want to move forward. We do want to do that. I think as a committee member, it's never been clearly laid out, and perhaps that's something we should look at, that staff should look at and say, okay, council has passed this rule and says, okay, we want you guys to do it. All right, well, how do those two systems merge together? The one that we've spent years working on with all the data that's in there, with backup, with the analysis, how does that fit into that new model? And how do you see us going through that? And I'm not casting aspersions at all. I'm just, as a committee member, I'm not sure how that's going to look.
Mm-hmm.
And before I can commit myself to, hold on, excuse me. Before I can commit myself to a timeline, I need to know what that process looks like. It looks nice on these charts that you have, but I still don't know how we're going to get to that because I don't know how those systems merge together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, because
the
system that we use right now, the current operating system that we use that is used to provide you paper worksheets is the same system that is merged into OpenGov. OpenGov is just a kaleidoscope that sits on top of the current system. We're not losing any history. We're not losing any of the data. We're not losing any of that. None of that. You're going to see it in a digital spreadsheet that looks very similar to the spreadsheets that you had on paper. You don't lose any of that. We're not changing how you budget. What we're changing or proposing to change is the resident input that goes into that budget.
And I don't think anybody has a problem with that, Sylvia. What I'm saying is, those words that you just used tonight are the first time I've heard anything about how we're going to work in that new system. All of us on the committee, I'm sorry, give me a moment. All of us on the committee have said, okay, this new system's coming, and I've mentioned this before, perhaps an orientation at some point of what that process would look like for us, and how because you have to understand, all we know is those sheets. Mm-hmm. and we're not adverse to changing that. I say me. I'm all for moving ahead on that and making that work better and flow better for the citizens and for us to make those analyses. But I don't know what that looks like. And so to commit to a system that I have no idea, and you say more public hearings, well, what does that mean for us as a committee? How many more times are we going to have to meet? It's just having clarity on those unknown variables that helps us make a decision. And I hope that makes sense.
That's exactly what the worksheet looks like.
Can I add something here, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Not much different than what you see today.
I design and implement software systems for a living. And one of the rules we have is when we cut over to a new system is that we tend to run them both side by side, because the translation from the old system to the new system is almost never clean. And there is a whole process we have to go through to learn what it is we need to do to make the new system work. And we're proposing, we're in the middle of a crisis. In this meeting, we proposed a whole set of things that we need to look at to improve what we have today. And we're going to cut over to a brand new system and a brand new process at the same time we're doing all that. I think that's a recipe for chaos. I am not objecting to the use of OpenGov. I think we should get there as quickly as we can. I am not objecting to citizen input. I'm objecting to the process of how we go about this. And I think, I would reiterate Michael's points that we don't know what that looks like yet.
Well, it's not a cutover. We're not abandoning the old system. The old system is the underlying data feed. This is just a different viewer. So I've participated in several implementations, and you're right, you can't just cut over and abandon the old system. We're not abandoning the old system. The budget process, how it was supposed to go forward, has always been in OpenGov, and everybody has said we don't not want to use OpenGov. I'm not saying we're not going to use OpenGov, and to understand what's being fed is still what Regine is putting in. That's number one. Everybody needs to understand that we are not abandoning our old system at all. And then number two, the change in the process is truly public comment at the front end. That's it. That's the change in the process. I'm not changing the amount of meetings that you're required to have. Quite frankly, it's an onus more on staff than it is on the Budget and Finance Committee.
And I would also add what we have normally dealt with is that our budgets were more department driven. So like, let's say the police department came to us with their budget. The Public Works came to us with their budget, or they came to Regine basically with their budget, and it was presented to us. All this is another additional step to me where we get more resident engagement, and then that will be incorporated into this process. So I totally understand some of the concerns about this. The OpenGov is it's new technology, and so that's going to be different. But I think this process is, I think it's really critical now that we get more resident participation, given that our resources may be stretched more, and that will help the budget committee formulate that budget and make good decisions.
Yeah, let me just restate again, and I think I agree with Charles. I don't think anybody's calling into question the new system. No one's questioning citizen participation. It's the unclarity with what we're supposed to be doing as a committee, or at least, so perhaps, how about this? Why don't we retreat a little bit and give some thought to doing a get together as a group and saying, here's what, because these sheets are flashing in front of us, and all we know are these sheets that we've worked up with for years, and how those two meld together, I think, and help me committee members, is where I'm unclear about what these steps are going to look like.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Alfonso.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would like to say something. Each agenda has citizens and public comments in each agenda. So that means that we invite the public. If somebody wants to come, they can come, and they publish all of these agendas. The budget is also, if somebody wants to see the budget, they can go and they would see the budget. So sometimes I think we are a little confused, because I remember sometimes we want to change everything because we believe that the old is obsolete and now this will do the job. But no, we are doing the job, and a lot of places they are doing the job. It's another tool. I am so happy that now they came with new programs. But in order to understand that programs, we need to work together. I agree with you and with Charles, and also with Terry. If at this moment we start how we can schedule May 5, they will do this presentation. And the city council, if you have 3 persons of the council, they approve that. So we will start with this program. So we will start in parallel how we will be working. This is very new. So for us, I think that we need to work with more time. And again, Charles is right. You have to have side by side and try to see how that works. And if at this moment we don't know what happened in June, July with revenues, this kind of thing, how that will work. This is not a robot that will do that. This is a machine that you feed numbers and by equations give it to you results. So at this moment, I think we need to think a lot and we need to talk a lot. And it's not only that we will have this and this is your new equipment, and if you like it or not, this is that we will have. I disagree with that. Thank you.
Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
So
We're just not connecting.
I think
we're just not being able to put the two together. Does that make sense? You know what we're talking about.
So I agree with that because I too am having a hard time, but I really would like to move ahead. And the way I understand it is you're going to get the same spreadsheet. It's just going to be a digital version.
Okay.
It's not going to be a Excel spreadsheet. It's going to be on the computer.
Okay.
So all the work we do will be on the computer, and we all have the same. Like let's say, for instance, the admin department. There's going to be a sheet with the history and what the what this budget number, what the year we're in right now. We don't know what those numbers are exactly, but we can always change it. And that's one of the good things about it, because like we're creating these sheets now, and then 3 months down the road we can go in and update the numbers for this year, and it'll all just do it automatically, and I won't have to do 10 new spreadsheets by hand. It'll all be done on the computer. So you will get that information. It's just going to be digital. And that I have not seen a completed budget book yet either, because we're in the middle of entering in the data that's needed to start the database. We're basically entering the old budget book into a format that's going to get downloaded to General Gov, and out of that download, it's going to create those sheets. And so I'm not trying to discourage the old one. I don't really think we should have to do too much, but I think once you see that spreadsheet after we've got it all entered and what it will show up with, it'll make more sense. It's going to be just like the book. Maybe not just like it, but like the book, only digital.
So
if that sheds some different light.
So all the past analysis that we did, where we looked back at the 3 and 5 years and we had the percentages in there, those objects that were one-time budgeted and then budgeted, and then all the backup from the department heads on what each one of those items were, and all the work that we did, all that's going to be in these sheets?
Yeah, Sylvia, can you go back to that spreadsheet, the one that shows the budget part? And Sylvia, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way I'm understanding it. There's a descriptor column that doesn't have anything in it right now.
Uh-huh.
Susanna is actually working on entering that stuff into the spreadsheet. She's going to have to go in and enter all that, or download all that. Those are the detail pages. We used to call them detail pages. Those will be the details. And in that column, there's going to be, like, you wanted if anything was over 3%, what was causing that 3%? That is where that's going to be. It's just not entered in there yet.
Could we recreate some of these for us so that we can see them, to make sure? What I don't want to do is get into the budget process and then trying to change to make it.
So
that we've been working
if
on.
I'm not mistaken, Susanna's almost at the end of entering the numbers from the budget book, And if it's not tomorrow, it's going to be the first of next week, I believe, Sylvia, right? To have something entered to where we can maybe at least show an example of what the pages will look like.
Yeah, we're
Is
going to
that right?
provide training. I mean, definitely some training, but we're right now we've got two different things going on. We've got OpenGov and we've got priority-based budgeting. Two different things. One's a tool, one's a process. You're going to get training on OpenGov. It's not different than what you had before. Trust me, it's just a digital version. The priority-based budgeting is how we execute and plan that. That's the difference. And it's resident engagement. And I'm sorry if I haven't made that clear, but if you don't want to do priority-based budgeting, you're basically saying, I really don't want to hear resident engagement. I'm happy to hear what staff has to say. And as a committee, we want to work on it. And I don't think that's what anybody means to say.
No. No one has ever said that. In fact, everybody's reiterated, we are clear and we want that. What we're saying is we don't understand the new process. You're introducing a new process, a new budgeting process. We want to know that all the history work that we've done as a committee is going to carry forward so we can help us in our analysis. And you want all those things to change and a new budget process. And we're just feeling a little overwhelmed with how all this is really going to happen. It's supposed to start next week.
No, it's not supposed to start for you next week. Staff has been working on it for several months already. Right now, we're at the tail end of scrubbing things. What's been audited? What actually should go in to give you good apples to apples comparison? I mean, I think from what I've heard from the time I got here is it's very difficult. If you're not on the budget committee, you can't make any sense of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. OpenGov is simply a tool, and you need to just consider that as a digital tool for how you normally do business. The performance-based piece, if you look at the calendar on these steps and you look at the calendar in your agenda, there's not a whole lot of difference in the time change. What staff has done is we've taken the onus of allowing a lot more resident participation. It doesn't change the budget committee's role. It doesn't do any of that. All this is doing is giving the residents more opportunity. And to Mr. Carmona's point, yes, all of the committees are public hearings. Yes, people have the opportunity to comment at any given time. But how many comments, how many residents actually show up to your committees? I'm just trying to open it to a wider audience so that I don't hear a lot more of, I didn't know, I didn't know, I didn't know. And that the budget really reflects the community's wants and desires. That's it. It's that simple.
Okay, let me just reiterate again, because we keep going around about this. Nobody on this committee has any problem with any of that. It's not about feeling like the citizens are not engaged in this. We're good with that, Sylvia. We don't have a problem with that. So that's really not the issue for us. What we want to be sure of is all the work that we've been doing in terms of drafting a process that really provides the data we need to do the analysis we need to do at budget time, that data follows this process. And I think that's where we're unclear. So could we do two things? And these are some suggestions. Going forward at the next all the committee meetings, at the committee because it sounds like there's a lot of work that's been going on that has to do with the budget that we're just kind of picking up little pieces of it here and there, that we could get a staff update at every committee meeting on where we are in this process and what the new process looks like. And two, that we would set up a time for us as a committee to do some orientation with us. Here's what you used to have. Here's what it's going to look like, so that when we actually start the process, we can visually see what that looks like. And we're not going, well, where's this? Well, where's that? And then you guys are frustrated because you spent a whole lot of time. And I appreciate that, because we are moving in a good direction, but you've spent a whole lot of time and we're all going, well, where is all this stuff when it's actually going to be there? So it's just the unknown. So if we can clear up some of the unknown between now and when we really engage, I think that process will go faster for you and for the committee and for the citizens. Does that make sense?
I think it's going to go much faster. Right now, the only thing Susanna is doing is actually, and quite honestly, I think has probably been near tears on a number of days, much like Regina and I, as we try to extract and get a clear understanding of an apples to apples, fund to fund movement of money. It's 5 years of history we're trying to provide you guys, plus this base year, plus the amended year. So there's 7 years of information there. Trust me, you're going to have the analytics. Trust me when I tell you that. You're going to have the analytics.
Well, with all due respect, I do trust you. But I want to know before I get out of the starting gate that you and I are on the same page. And with all due respect, you're just coming to the party, and we've been doing this a long time. And I appreciate everything you do. I just want to make sure when you and I go out the gate in this committee that we're on the same page together. And right now, I don't feel that. I'm not feeling it. Unless I'm the only one on the committee, and I don't think that's the case. We're still clueless about the process. And we're getting ready to start the process. So could we hit the pause button a little bit and then just visit those issues to make sure that we all have clarity and that comfort level that we're really on the same page?
So the process in open gov or the process in priority based?
Not the priority based. Okay, you're not listening to me. All the material that we've been assimilating for all these years about all these budget items, we just want to know that all that data is going to carry forward. The financial analysis and the trends that we've been developing, we want to be able to see what that looks like so that we're comfortable scanning down lists of items and we're not spending hours and hours of time going, where's this, where's that? Does that make sense? It's because I don't know what we're talking about that I don't know what I'm talking about. So if we would just help us understand that more, I think we would be more comfortable.
Well, Michael, I have to speak up. I don't appreciate what you're saying to Sylvia, and I think you ought to take this offline. If you're not up to speed, you're not listening to what she's saying. And
Okay.
I give her kudos for what she has done and what council's doing. I think you're just not listening.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
Michael.
No one's arguing against doing this. It's a question of how we get there.
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, Alfonso, go ahead.
I think then nobody dispute that the city administrator is working so hard and they try to do their best. But in this case, we need to have some communication. And if they have a plan, they need to pass that plan and we need to work together. Again, we need to work together. In that way, we don't have surprise. This is not difficult for anybody, but we need to know that we are reading the same page of the book. Yeah. Again, the noise. Thank you for the noise.
Well, let me say, and I apologize if somehow that came across as being critical.
I'm in a meeting right now, finance meeting.
That has never been my intention. My intention is just adding clarity to the process.
We'll do.
So don't misunderstand that, Sylvia. And I apologize if that came across wrong. Is there anything else we need to cover tonight?
I just need to reiterate, if somebody brought up, and I would again request a copy of those slides that Sylvia is presenting. If she could email that to us, that'd be great.
I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Sylvia, can those slides be sent to the committee members?
Yes, they're on the council agenda tonight, but I'll send those to the committee as well.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't see them. Huh.
No, they aren't.
They're on the council agenda, item number 14.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I make a motion.
I
make a motion to adjourn.
I need a second. I just need a second. Can somebody?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I can't wait till we can get back together and stop this nonsense. All right.
Yeah. We
So
haven't
Dr.
set
Browning
a
made the motion.
next meeting date.
Mr. Carmona seconded the motion.
That's correct. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all.
Yeah. Goodbye. Now I can see that with the city council. City council, I can see that the slides. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey guys, have a nice weekend.